You surface from the underground at Piccadilly Circus.
Mind the gap.
Making your way through the glittering lights of London's West End, you take a turn down a quaint-looking street into the notorious neighborhood of Soho. The lights are up, the crowd is buzzing, and you just stepped into the best seat in the house. Welcome to The Big Smoke, a variety show podcast. I'm Kevin Bennett, and I'll be your guide through this experience of comedy, conversation, and community. This week on The Big Smoke, we're packing our bags and setting off on a whirlwind journey from London to Malawi to Canada, and then a mysterious location. We're joined by travel writer Helena Smith, whose job may just be the most romantic in the world. Then, it's fresh bread and a fresh start in this week's Parish Notices, as Ahmad introduces us to Breadwinners, a social enterprise that's baking change with every sourdough loaf. Next, we blow the dust off another audio archive. This time, it's a museum audio guide, a riddle for your ears. Can you figure out where or what it is? And finally, backed by popular demand, Archie's Neuro Nuggets returns. This week, a quick science-backed tip to bring more art into your life and more life into your brain. But first, it's time to play Maple Leaf or Make Believe. Here's how the game works. I will read out 3 different Canadian news headlines. One of these headlines is the real thing, Maple Leaf. The rest, Make Believe. Can you figure out which one is real? Here are the headlines. Headline number 1, from the Beacon Herald in Stratford, Ontario. Local man fined for attempting to barter with maple syrup at Tim Hortons drive-thru. Headline number 2, from City News Vancouver in British Columbia. Vancouver bakery bandit calls to apologize, offers to pay for broken door and cupcakes. Headline number 3, from the Davidson Leader in Davidson, Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan man caught shoveling neighbor's driveway at 3 a.m. claims he just couldn't sleep. Think you know which one is the real Maple Leaf? You'll find out at the end of the episode. It's time to welcome our first guest. She is a travel writer for Lonely Planet, Rough Guides and Bradt Guides. Please welcome Helena Smith. Helena Smith!
Hi.
Welcome to The Big Smoke. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for asking me.
So I believe that you have what some might consider the most romantic job in the world, or at least the most romantic job title, a travel writer. I feel like it's the stuff of romantic comedy films, fantasies, eat, pray, love, people going off on their journeys and learning about themselves. And I actually mean that in a very genuine way. When I hear that someone is a travel writer, you've written for Lonely Planet, among other publications, it sounds like such an adventurous thing, such a, as I said, romantic thing. Do you agree that it's a romantic job?
It can
or have you become jaded now?
I think I became jaded for a little while and then I did something else and then I became unjaded. And
How long have you been doing it for?
Ooh, good question. I was an editor at Rough Guides, which is the sort of British Lonely Planet equivalent. I did that for a long time and just increasingly felt very envious of the people I was commissioning to go off and write. So I think I've been freelance probably about 20 years.
So you were kind of in charge of all the people that got to go off and do all the fun. And then thought, why am I not able to do that?
Yes. Yeah.
Was it something that you always wanted to do? Did it have to do with traveling? Did it have to do with writing? I know you're a photographer as well. But what's the sort of origin, or was this something that you stumbled into?
It was quite specific, actually, I think. I actually just loved Rough Guides as a company. I loved the products. I thought the books were absolutely brilliant. So I think whenever I travelled, I used the Rough Guide. And they always said at the back, if you have any comments, please write to us. So I did that very nerdily and diligently. And then would always follow up with, if you've got any jobs. So I used, I think particularly the Rough Guide to Italy. And I guess I found it just opened up the country for me, really. It was just so, all the things you'd expect, great places to go out and eat and stuff. But I guess more the kind of cultural information and the kind of depth.
What kinds of comments? Were you correcting things?
Yeah,
Were you just saying, "Oh, I really love this bit"? Were you?
Yeah, probably sucking up a little bit and then correcting to prove that I was of value, I guess.
How many of those did you have to do before?
I did loads. So when I finally got an interview, they actually had a kind of file. It was quite embarrassing. They had a thick file and they were like, wow, you really want to work
You're like
here.
stalking us, or you're like, or it's like someone who does like complaint letters or emails. You're like, okay, you know what? We've dealt with enough customer complaints from you. Well, let's just hire you.
Exactly.
We might as well pay you. You've written so much stuff.
Yeah.
So how old were you when you started writing those things in?
I guess I was sort of mid-20s. I'd done some other stuff first. It was a time maybe like it is at the moment where it was kind of hard to get into a job. I'd been working as a editorial assistant for a big commercial publisher and I just absolutely hated it. It was just awful. They, I guess they should remain nameless, but by their own admission, they were publishing crap. It was really like commercially successful crap, but they would have editorial meetings where they'd kind of say, has anyone got any rubbish we can publish? Yeah.
And what was your job exactly for them?
So just incredibly lowly. I was just sort of doing admin. But I think it's the kind of job where if you have the facility or the va-va-voom, you can actually kind of climb up the greasy pole and make something of yourself. So to try and encourage that, my boss would take me out to lunch and say, what are you reading? And it was a time of kind of chick lit, Bridget Jonesy type stuff. And I was reading David Copperfield. So I told her and her face just fell. I think she just thought, oh,
that's
God,
not for us.
Just settled
you got to go somewhere else. So what about, let's go back a little bit earlier because I'm curious. So were your pursuits then more to do with the literary world as opposed to travel? Did you even conceive that you could be someone that was a travel writer and photographer early on? I'm thinking specifically, I know that you spent some time when you were a kid in Malawi, but you're from Scotland, yes?
Yes.
So born and raised, and then how old were you when your family moved to Malawi?
I was 11 when we went to Malawi and we were there for 2 years. So it was very, very formative time. It was sort of really going from being a kid into being a teenager. So yeah, it's an incredible country, a country that I just absolutely love. I was very settled where I was. I was very settled at school and then suddenly everything changed.
Before,
yeah.
You wrote this lovely piece about that journey, moving to Malawi, and you mention, like any young person or most young people, you really didn't want to go. You're sort of being forced by your parents.
Yeah.
And I was just curious do you ever track the sort of, I guess, journey or line from, being resistant to leaving as an adolescent, you're in Scotland, you want to stay there, to then you're pursuing a career that makes you go places and you want to go to these places?
Yeah.
How did that sort of transition happen, or have you thought about that before?
I guess I sort of transitioned while I was there into just absolutely loving it to the point where I really didn't want to leave. And I think, like lots of kids, you can really, you're kind of more open and more malleable and you can just switch. So I remember just dreading going into school. I went to a weekly boarding school and kind of crying and weeping. And then I think I just suddenly woke up one day and thought, actually, this is kind of fun, really, kind of an adventure. So yeah, I guess it just gave me, I don't know, I suppose a love of travel and just this feeling that I can kind of manage, I can get by, I can, I'm just more open to different kind of experiences, I guess. So
what is your favorite thing about Malawi? Because you moved there, you were a teenager?
I was 11.
Preteen? 11,
so
okay.
preteen.
So preteen. And then now you've written a lot about it. And that's sort of one of the main tenets of your work as a travel writer and photographer is you've written about music in Malawi. You've written a guidebook to Malawi or been a contributor to that. So what are some of your favorite things about the country that you talk about in your writing?
It sounds like a cliche, but the people, it's a cliche, but it's known as the warm heart of Africa. And I just find it to be the most open place. People are very funny. People are, just kind of ridiculously friendly and kind. And there was a recent poverty index publication that rated it as the 7th poorest country in the world. So people have very little, but they kind of share, I guess. So it kind of was and continues to be a life lesson for me. I think Malawi kind of has it all. It's got incredible wildlife. It's got a huge lake, so about 15% of the country is lake. And it's got these amazing cichlid fish. So, goldfish that you see in goldfish bowls will be cichlid fish from Lake Malawi. It's just the type of fish. But the kind of technicolor fish, they're really, they're small,
bright,
really brightly coloured.
Wow.
So if you can just put on some goggles and stick your head under the water and you're in a kind of
And that's
Disney
in a
film.
lake. Is Malawi landlocked, or is it on the coast?
It's landlocked. Yeah, so it's got this huge lake, but it's also got a huge mountain, Mount Malanje, and just very, very kind of varied landscapes, and it's gorgeous.
And you wrote about the music in Malawi. There's a specific article. What made you want to write about the music there, and what do you remember particularly standing out about that?
There's a festival called Lake of Stars, which is Malawi's big music festival. And when I went to that the first time, I found it hard to kind of track the music that I remembered from when I lived there. So in Malawi, people often make their own instruments because they don't have access to like guitars or whatever. But the first time I went to Lake of Stars, the music that was popular was, gospel rap, which was a really
That's
horrible concoction. It wasn't great. And kind of R&B, very Americanized. So I guess I tried to go on a little journey to discover what else was happening in Malawian music. Well,
you said, I believe this is a quote from you, that it is a profoundly musical nation suffering something of an identity crisis. What do you mean by that?
I think that's probably changed. I wrote that a long time ago. So I think I meant that, they were kind of looking to music from America, basically. And now I think there's a band called the Madalitso Band. So one of them plays guitar, the other plays, I think it's called a babatone. It's a huge, homemade instrument with one string, and they sing these beautiful harmonies, and they've become really popular, along with other Malawian musicians. So I feel that people are now going back a little bit to kind of the source. And,
you wrote about a couple other groups. I wonder if they're still going, but the Malawi Mouse Boys.
Yeah, I don't think the Mouse Boys are still doing their thing.
That sounded like a really good. You said they once sold mice on sticks as roadside snacks. This is in the article. And they play homemade instruments and use Coke cans and bike spokes for percussion. Yeah. It's a really specific image. You can kind of almost place yourself in the festival. When was the last time you were there in Malawi?
I was there last year.
Oh, great.
So I went to Lake of Stars. I was traveling actually with my partner, who's a musician, and he played at Lake of Stars.
Oh, wow.
And we connected with two young Malawian musicians from Zomba University and travelled with them, and they were arts band while he was in Malawi. Wow. So that was really great.
Have you noticed, Malawi maybe is the place you've been to the most, or at least in terms of, you were there when you were 11, then you were there last year. How have you seen it change over time?
In some ways, it's changed very little. So kind of physically, I guess it's what people would term an underdeveloped country, which means that there hasn't been tons of new building or anything. So it's very physically recognizable. One thing that's changed for the worst is there's a huge issue with deforestation. So lots of trees have been cut down. I think there's a kind of growing consciousness that's contributing to lots of problems, including the lake levels have risen very dramatically.
Heat maybe too, as you hear?
Yes.
So is this the Malawi government doing that, or is that other people?
It's kind of everybody. I think it's the government. So when we lived in Malawi, there was a dictator called Hastings Banda who was in power for, I think, probably about 30 years. And he was eventually deposed. He was the kind of self-proclaimed life president of Malawi, and they got rid of him. He was not.
Why did your family move there? If there was that doesn't sound like a great situation to go into.
No, I guess it was
your parents' work or something, or
yeah, they taught at the university in Malawi,
Okay.
so it was the kind of place that was reasonably safe. Well, totally safe actually for expats, unless you spoke out about it, in which case you would be deported. So,
Right.
So my mum was teaching African literature at the University of Malawi, and she ran a writers' workshop, and people spoke about the politics very obliquely. Nobody could say anything. There were spies, so I remember going to one of the sessions with my mum, and somebody just whispered to us, that guy over there is a spy.
Wow.
So you couldn't speak openly, and you had to use metaphor. And I discovered last time I went that now at the university they teach the literature of that time as being very kind of metaphorical, using a lot of metaphorical language.
like hidden kind of meanings underneath these metaphors.
Yep.
Wow. Did you get to learn any of that, or the sort of like understand the metaphor complex? I mean, you were only 11, but
I was too young, I think.
Yeah.
But my parents have a very good friend called Jack Mapanji, who was one of these writers, metaphorical writers.
Wow.
But he was actually, just after we left Malawi, he was imprisoned by the government, spent 4 years in prison in Malawi, quite a big chunk of it in solitary confinement with there was no charge and no trial. So there was a huge amnesty campaign to get him out. But yeah, for Malawian people, it could be a very dangerous time. And
And are you saying, is it a democratic government now?
it
or,
is.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So does it feel safer, or when you go there?
Yeah, I think it does. There's a free press. And the big change that I noticed going back was, I think, what I remember is Malawian people maybe seeming a little bit passive because they weren't free to speak. And when I went back, people just seemed, people love talking about politics, and it just seemed kind of more exuberant and kind of bubbly. And then the other completely weird thing about Hastings Banda was he had all these restrictions on what you could wear. So he hated hippies. So men couldn't have long hair. There was a barber at the airport. So if you arrived with long hair, you'd have it cut off.
Even a tourist or anybody?
Yeah, tourists.
Wow.
Yeah, definitely hippie tourists were not welcome. You couldn't wear flares. And
Like pants that flared out?
Yeah.
Like bell bottoms and
Yeah.
things like that?
And women couldn't wear, we couldn't wear shorts. We couldn't wear trousers.
So just like a long dress?
We had to wear
skirt
long
kind of
dresses
thing.
or skirts that had to go over the knee. They
Right.
would actually measure the length
Wow.
of your skirt. So that was really weird. And so people kind of looked very buttoned up. And now, people just wear whatever they want, which is great.
So the book that you wrote on Malawi, is that a Rough Guides or Lonely Planet? Or
That is a company called Brad.
Oh,
And
Brad, okay.
the book was actually written by somebody called Philip Briggs. So he wrote it a long time ago. And I've just updated it twice. So the
okay.
last 2 editions, I've updated the book.
So if you're interested in Malawi, check out the Brad,
Brad
travel guide.
Yeah.
Or you can find information on Helena's website, which we'll talk about at the end. Let's sort of dance around to some of the other things that you've done. I mean, there's looking through your portfolio, there's lots of fascinating articles and, not just, I'm going to talk about this country, but specific things within places. I'm thinking, for example, there was a lovely article about neon lights in LA that you wrote, an article about people doing a sort of Camino from London to Scotland. But let me ask you first, do you have any favorite places or topics that you've written about?
Walking, probably. So I wrote a long time ago, I think about 20 years ago, possibly longer, I wrote a guide to walks in London and the southeast for Rough Guides. And I think it was partly, I really feel the contradiction in being somebody who cares about climate change and is a travel writer. And when I travel in Europe, I don't fly, but otherwise I obviously do, and I'm promoting travel. So I think I felt that I wanted to do something kind of very local where you don't need a car. You can access all the walks by train. Deeper than that, I suppose. I just think there's such an incredible variety of landscapes around London. And especially the first time I did the book, I've kind of updated it a few times. It was just such a amazing discovery, really, for me. And, you know, the kind of ancient side of England, the ancient walks and the stone circles and all that stuff was just so lovely to discover.
Well, it's also apparently been described as pornography for the desk-bound. So if you're interested in that, your Rough Guides walks around London and Southeast.
Yeah, that was Will Self. So it was.
Who is Will Self?
Will Self is he's a journalist and writer.
Okay.
And so
high praise.
Pretty pleased.
So let's look at that then. So from Malawi to now your local London and the regions around London in the UK, what's a favorite walk? Let's start with London. That you have that you would...
I'm in the process of slowly updating it at the moment. So I did one recently, which was Hackney, going from Hackney across the marshes to Walthamstow. And it kind of links to really different markets. So Broadway Market, which is very kind of foodie and shishy and lovely.
Fantastic, yeah. Love it.
And then Walthamstow Market, which is apparently the longest market in Europe. It's like a mile long.
Is that mostly food or is it?
No, it's kind of clothes but it's quite it's not the fanciest market in the world, I would say.
I don't know if I've been there actually.
Yeah,
before.
it's really fun. It's really kind of colourful and a bit sort of crazy. You could buy, I don't know, like a diamante studded collar for your dog and stuff like that.
How do you determine? Like, how do you decide what constitutes a walk? Are they things that is it a route that you invent, or are they paths and trails that already exist?
It's a bit of both, but I think most of them are not in London because I was living in London and not hugely enjoying it and just needing a dose of countryside. So most of them are outside of London. It was always either circular or going from one train station to the next. Then I thought you really have to have like a pub or somewhere good to eat along the way. So those were the restrictions. And
so you had to be able to get there by train.
Yeah.
And there had to be a pub somewhere along the way or at the end of the walk kind of thing.
But I'm not really the best planner in the world, so it would often go really horribly wrong. And I used to do the walks with lots of people, and we'd end up kind of like running across fields to get to pubs before 2:00 before they stopped serving food. So there was a lot of
maybe that's why you're a good travel writer, because it's like you have to organize it and get it together. Because I'm the same way as a traveler. I don't like planning. I just like going somewhere and then seeing what happens. But often that'll get me in all sorts of trouble. Like my phone won't have internet or something or I'll forget the converter or whatever it is. And suddenly I'm in, India in the north of Mumbai, and my hotel's 2 hours in the south, and I've got 5% battery left, and I have to find my way back somehow, which I actually kind of love. But
I kind of love that as well. I think I'm probably
lost in that kind of thing.
Doing that a bit less, but I think I almost, without realizing it, quite perversely was opening myself up to things going wrong.
Sort of purposely giving yourself a challenge, scaring yourself, and then getting over it. And there's like a real human thing to that journey. I was going to ask you actually before, because I want to ask you a little bit about the walks outside of London, but I recently discovered one just maybe a couple of weeks ago, which is I have a bit of a habit sometimes if I've got nothing to do on a Saturday or Sunday, I'll just hop on a bus I live in central London, and I'll hop on a bus route somewhere. So I got on, can't remember which one, but it took me up to Finsbury Park, and then I discovered from there, and I actually looked up what it was called.
Is it the Parkland Way?
Yes, Parkland Walk. Lovely. There it is.
Yeah.
So if you're listening, you go to Finsbury Park, and on the west side, you start walking up the west side of the park, and then you go left, like you turn west, and you kind of go over this train bridge in a way, and it turns into this absolutely stunning walk that takes you all the way from Finsbury Park to, I guess, Highgate kind of area.
Yeah, Queenswood.
Queenswood
an ancient
and
woodland. And there's a lovely, did you find the cafe? There's a cafe in the wood that's like something out of a fairy tale.
I think I stopped before the wood.
Yeah.
Because I think there's one point maybe where you sort of have to go through, maybe it's not Highgate, but some little kind of
Yes.
villagey area, and then you get into the
That's
wood.
right, yeah.
So I think I stopped there.
Yeah.
But has that walk been one of the,
It's in my book.
what's the cafe? Sorry.
I can't remember.
No,
what
but I
it's
mean,
called.
is it what did you say about it? I can't
It was
remember.
like a fairy tale, like almost like a gingerbread cottage looking place.
In the sort of forest.
Yeah, really fun.
Okay, well, look that up in your book. So tell me then, if you were saying that a lot of it has to do with kind of escaping London, because I connect with this as a Soho resident. So give me off the top of your head either maybe the most recent or your most favorite outside of London, but something that I could do easily in a day from the centre of London.
Yeah, my mum is from Sussex, so I always love going there and getting onto the South Downs. So I've got a few South Downs walks. A really lovely one is going to Lewes, which is a gorgeous little town, and then you can go kind of over the downs and then to the sea and walk along to Brighton, end up at Brighton. So that's a really nice one.
Okay, I'm going to try that. I've never been to Lewes.
Oh, Lewes is lovely. Yeah.
I've been to Brighton, but I've never been to Lewes.
Yeah.
So you take the train to Lewes.
Yep.
And then following the rough guides, you walk. And how long of a walk is it to end up in Brighton?
It's quite a long one. Altogether, it would be like 4 or 5 hours, something like that.
That's a good
But
one.
you can have a little swim, along the way and sea swim, and it's really nice.
And you were talking about sort of ancient forests and ancient history of London. What did you learn about that you really enjoyed when you started digging into the London and the surrounding area walks? Or why did that appeal to you?
One of the walks is it's a bit of a stretcher to put it in the book because it's a little bit far from London. But one of the walks is the Ridgeway, which is I think probably the oldest road in Britain. I think it was a kind of cattle drovers road, and it's got this kind of collection of ancient sites. So one of them is the Uffington horse, which is a huge chalk horse, and it's one of those really mysterious things where you're on the ground, you can't see that it's a horse. It doesn't look like anything. You can only see the shape from the air. So you're like, how the heck?
When you say chalk, what do you mean? Like it's like a big statue? Or
No, it's cut into the turf. So it's kind of lines in the ground.
Oh, I see.
But you just think, how did they do this? And also, why did they do it if nobody could actually see it until
and how old is
aeroplanes
this?
were invented? Oh, like 2,000 years or something.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Where is that again?
That's it's on the Ridgeway. So
oh, right.
Yeah.
So the Ridgeway.
Yeah, so
and is the Ridgeway like a sort of dirt path, or is it a road now? Has it been paved?
It's a track, really. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So there's that site, and then there's a tomb called Wayland Smithy, which again is totally ancient. The horse might be older than 2,000 years. I can't quite remember, but the tomb is about 2,000 years old, I think. So just this amazing collection of sites.
And is there a good pub on that walk?
I believe there is.
Well, there has to be.
Yeah,
apparently.
there has to be.
That's
part
that's part of the deal. Well, let's go back into London and talk a little bit about Hackney, which seems to have a special place in your heart. You've written The Only Guide to Hackney. Is it called Inside Hackney?
Inside Hackney.
Inside Hackney?
Yeah.
You've also written a mouth-watering, would you call it a food book, a recipe book? Recipe book called Eat Hackney, which when I was looking at images of it, made me very hungry. So first of all, why have you wanted to write about Hackney, and what do you love about that borough in London?
Yeah, I lived there for a long time. And when I moved there, I kind of thought, how am I going to get to know this place? So I started a food blog called Eat Hackney, just to almost force myself to get to know the place and get to know people. But I'm not actually really a real foodie. Like, I'm kind of unfussy and almost like anything. So what interested me really was where people came from. Like lots of London, there are people from all over the world. So I had this idea of, instead of, traveling to find different cultures, trying to find the different cultures actually where I was, but doing it through food, because I think it's something that people kind of love to share, I guess.
Yeah, everybody
And
gathers around the table. When you were writing the food blog, which led to the recipe book, was it that you were going to different restaurants specifically and kind of reviewing them, or how did that work?
yeah, going to restaurants and interviewing people, I guess, and they would share, as part of it, they'd share a recipe.
Okay, so you shared the recipes as well.
Yeah, yep. And then at the same time, I was sort of struggling to find a lot of meaning in it. I think I was just looking for something. I didn't quite know what I was looking for. Then I had the idea of doing a recipe book, but as a fundraiser. So I connected with 2 Hackney charities who feed people. So the Hackney Migrant Centre and North London Action for the Homeless. So I did 2 editions of the cookbook. Kind of along the way, over the years, I became a vegetarian, almost vegan. So the first one is not a vegan cookbook and the second one is. So the book kind of raised money for the charities. And I just became more interested in the kind of things that they were doing in feeding people and food projects and food poverty and people doing a little bit more than just setting up a restaurant. So
yeah, and I love how this recipe book, the proceeds to a recipe book go towards feeding people is a beautiful thing. In the book, for people who are maybe interested, obviously it has recipes and images of the food. Does it mention some of the places where they could get it as well, or is it just the recipes?
yeah, every recipe is kind of linked to a cafe or a restaurant or a project, so you can then go to that place.
Oh,
and
fantastic.
yeah.
And did this book come before the Inside Hackney guide?
I think it did. I think it sort of led into.
So tell me about the Inside Hackney, which is more of a general guide to Hackney, yes?
Yeah, I guess I was loving living there. I was feeling very much kind of part of the community through doing Eat Hackney, and I just thought there was a sort of gap there. And again, I think it was me not wanting to be away all the time, not really wanting to fly very much. And yeah, so I just did a kind of DIY thing. I did a crowdfunder to try and raise money for it. And I just made it up as I went along. And the first edition, I was like, how many copies shall I do? And for some reason, I thought it was something mad, like 25,000. It was just a huge number and they were free. So I got...
oh, sorry, go on. I was going to say, as soon as he says they were free, I was like, so who published it?
So I just did it myself. And
how did you get 25,000 copies then?
I just fundraised.
Oh, you did
I did a crowdfunder.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. That's mad.
It was mad, and it didn't really work in the sense that it didn't make me any money at all. And I devoted like a ludicrous amount of time to it. But it was kind of a lovely thing to do. And again, I thought it was a bit like with Eat Hackney. I thought there's so much about gentrification, food, and there were lots of publications about Hackney, and they actually seemed very white. You could almost see people thinking like, oh my God, we haven't got any Black people in this
like
publication.
The hipster guide to Hackney kind of thing. Like once it became cool almost.
Yes, exactly.
Here's a guide.
Very hipsterish. So I decided to just do something different.
If you Google Inside Hackney, Helena Smith, listeners, I'm sure you will find a bootleg copy somewhere.
You can read the PDF, I guess, on my website. I did two editions of it. And then I guess I felt I'd run out of steam with the crowdfunding. That I found that quite draining, and I thought I actually can't do that a third time, so I'm going to just stop doing this. But it was fun. What's
your favorite one or two of your favorite things in that book, like areas to go in Hackney or shop or park or something?
I've got a favorite project, which isn't for everyone because it's actually for the over 60s, and I hasten to add that I'm not over 60 myself, but I it was a kind of, well, it's still going, still very much thriving, I think. So I was volunteering for North London Action for the Homeless, and that was hosted in a church, and there's a very wonderful vicar who just decided to open his church to all sorts of projects that, I don't know, benefiting the local community. And one of them was this thing called the Posh Club. So that was set up by the people who, I think it's called Ducky, the collective. So they were running events in the Vauxhall Tavern. So very kind of queer, very outrageous sort of cabaret. And the person who was running those events, his mum was living in Hackney. She was very lonely. And he suddenly just thought, what am I doing? Why am I not putting on events for people like my mum? So he started what's called the Posh Club, which is for the over 60s. It's very affordable. I think it was like about a fiver to go. And the idea was that you would just put on your best clothes, you'd be served afternoon tea, and then you would watch this cabaret.
Oh, I love it.
They didn't sort of tone it down at all, the cabaret. It was totally outrageous in a this sort of church hall setting. So the first time I went, there was a reverse stripper. So someone who got onto the stage naked and then put their clothes on.
That is
there was,
hilarious.
Chinese Elvis and kind of Bollywood dancing and
Wow.
stuff. And then it ended up winning lots of awards for, combating loneliness, isolation, and
Did you have to be over 60 to go, or could you?
You
go?
had to be, or you
So
had
how
to.
did you get to go?
Well,
then?
I wrote about it, so the vicar asked me.
So if you want to go and you're under 60, write about it.
Write about it or volunteer.
But actually, you know
Yeah.
what? This is a really good point that I think it's the Posh Club, right?
Yeah.
Just for anyone who's listening who does want to look it up. But I was thinking, I really love and am inspired by you were living in Hackney and wanted to create a way to maybe get to know people and find more meaning in things. And I think creating this blog, even if you didn't make any money out of it at first or ever or whatever, and you didn't know what it was going to turn into, you created a framework for connection for yourself and for community and for learning and creativity and all of these things. And it's almost like sometimes I feel like that's what we need. I mean, for me, here we are doing this podcast. I mean, I interview people all over the world, but it's a celebration of who I want to get to know and share with other people, and also of this city and other places. So I really love that. I just want to ask you a couple more things. So tell us about anything you're working on right now or what you have coming up in the world of travel, community, all the wonderful things that you do.
I'm doing a few things at the moment. One thing is I've been commissioned by Lonely Planet to be one of the authors on a guide to the Orient Express.
This is so cool. So tell us specifically what you will be doing for this. What does it entail in terms of the research you have to do, and what is the project just in general?
So I'm not doing what I hoped I'd be doing when I pitched for it, which was actually going on the Orient Express and being very swanky and having very...
Reading Agatha Christie and hoping
exactly.
it doesn't happen to you. The murder on the Orient Express.
It's kind of how to do like a DIY version of the Orient Express. So I'm doing one section. There are a kind of number of different historical routes. So I'm doing one of them, which involves going to Dijon, Strasbourg, Salzburg. And then I'm writing about what they call the kind of toolkit section of the book. So the practicalities of it.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Where do you know offhand the beginning and the end of the Orient Express?
Well, I think the beginning and the end is either London or Paris. I don't know if historically it started in Paris, but the end is Istanbul.
Okay.
So kind of interesting.
You were saying the concept of this is Lonely Planet is creating a sort of like do-it-yourself version if you maybe can't afford to do the full thing or want to do a section of it, or and is this and you were mentioning before, and I just wanted the listener to know, is this was because they're relaunching the Orient Express or something like that?
Yeah. So
okay.
the service itself was suspended. I think it's not been happening for quite a few years. So they've relaunched it and it kind of looks amazing, like really beautiful interiors and stuff.
I wonder how long the trip would be if someone were to do that.
Yeah, I don't know. I should
What a
find out.
kind of fantasy. And you're working on updating the guide to Malawi, which is exciting. How often do these need to be updated?
So that the Bradt Guide is updated. Well, I don't know. I've only done it twice, and COVID intervened, so it was actually a long gap. So I think maybe normally it's possibly every 3 years or something, but it was actually a 5-year gap for me between the two trips.
Now, just to circle back to the beginning before we start to wrap up, you harassed Lonely Planet.
Rough Guides.
Rough Guides, sorry. You harassed them until you got a job. How would you recommend if there was someone listening and they thought, gosh, travel writing, that's just my fantasy. And I could, I mean, a lot of people want to work remote these days. They want to go different places, and there's a lot of non-travel writing jobs. But if someone wanted to do what you've done, writing guides, whether it be locally or in places around the world, outside of harassing a publisher, is there any route that you would recommend? Like, is there a type of schooling, a type of apprenticeship, or is it just get out there, call people up kind of thing,
I would
knock on the door?
I'd say get out there, but I'd say, there are so many outlets for you to self-publish now. I think you can, if you really love to travel and love to write, just do it and do a blog or, whatever, just get started. And
it's almost like do it until you can legitimately do it. Because I guess when you started, there was not as much of a, like not everybody could have their own YouTube channel kind of thing.
No,
and so
absolutely.
you had these specific gatekeepers.
They were
maybe
gatekeepers, and I kind of think it's good that that's all changed, really.
Yeah, I guess it's maybe trickier to make a living if it's so watered down in a sense that everybody can do it.
Yes.
But and do places like Lonely Planet and Rough Guides, how do you get into those? Do you pitch to them? Because I know you're freelance, so you don't work full time for any one of them.
No.
If someone was interested in getting involved in one of those, what do they do?
So you can just write to them and ask. Lonely Planet do kind of recruit, so they've got an author pool, and you can kind of apply to be within the author pool. And then the process is that they publish a list of things that they're accepting pitches for. So the pool of authors can see what's coming up and can just go for whatever their expertise or maybe just a new interest is.
In terms of discovering more about you and your books and you also do, we should mention, we won't have time to talk about it, but you do incredible community work, gardening work, photography. Is your website the best place for people to find that?
Yeah.
So tell us that.
helenasmith.co.uk.
So helenasmith.co.uk if you're interested in, there's some beautiful images on there. And I'd mentioned a couple of my favorites. There's an article about neon lights in LA, which I recommend people read. I learned a lot about, I didn't know that about neon lights, specifically the history in LA, which is fascinating, but then also just how it's made and all that stuff. So you put in all these little lovely human details that really draw us into the pieces. So I recommend people check those out on your website. I want to ask you one more question, which is, we have a segment on the Big Smoke called Parish Notices, which is simply, how are you either recently or coming up fostering a sense of community or connection in your life? So do you have any parish notices to share with us today?
Yeah. So the issue of road safety is really close to my heart for personal reasons. And I go back to Scotland a lot. My parents live in a very small village called Gargunnock, which is near a town called Stirling. And there's a campaign and plan to build a bike route between the village and the town. And that's something I would love to contribute to and really hope that it happens.
And how do you or other people contribute to that?
I'm in the process of finding out. So it's a project that's kind of got quite far and seems to have stalled. And I think I can possibly bring my crowdfunding experience to it, because I think crowdfunders, they're obviously a way of raising money, but they're also a way of bringing pressure and raising awareness of issues and getting people invested in issues. So
I love it. Literally connecting one place to the other. Is there just a road right now, like
there's
a highway
road,
kind of thing?
And it's increasingly busy and horrible, and it has so many accidents. And I think there has to be a better way, basically, of getting one from one place to the other.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us on The Big Smoke. It was lovely chatting with you today.
Thank you. It's been fun.
When the bells ring out across The Big Smoke, we love hearing how connection and community are rising. This week, our roving correspondent Ahmad caught up with a charity that's baking those very values into every loaf.
Today, We're joined by the managing director from Breadwinners, a social enterprise turning fresh bread into fresh starts for young refugees and asylum seekers across the UK. Welcome to our Parish Notices segment. I'm Ahmad. Hi. Can you tell us a bit about who you are and Breadwinners and how it all started and the mission behind it?
Yeah, sure. My name is Martin Cosarinsky Campos. I'm the managing director of Breadwinners, which is a charity and a social enterprise. So we sell artisan organic bread, and we do that to support young refugees, mainly into work, but also to support their well-being. And this started from our chairman, who is in the bread industry, and he thought that bread connects people, connects culture, is probably in every plate of every household around the world, different breads, most probably. And it's something that unites people, and he thought that it would be a great idea to use bread as a source of good for supporting young refugees, and that's where I came in. I'm very passionate about supporting young refugees. I can see many things or many challenges when you come to a new country. So I'm Argentinian. For me, UK is now my home, but I was new in the UK. I also struggled to start finding a job, and I know how hard it is when you don't have previous UK work experience, and I know how much a job can make a difference, or being part of working can make a difference on your well-being. And I think what we're trying to do in Breadwinners is exactly that. If you think about any time when you were unemployed or trying to start your life in a new place, is giving that first opportunity for young refugees so that they can start with Breadwinners and then they can progress into their careers and move on.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's a tremendous job you're doing. But if I'm being honest, I've tried your bread. It's absolutely amazing. So good job. So what inspired the idea of using markets and bakeries to create opportunities for young refugees?
That's a great question. So yes, we sell organic artisan bread, sourdoughs mainly, and baked goods, pastries, brownies, trade breads. So it's a very wide variety. And to tell you the truth, the first time was not on markets. The first time we had a bike delivery service where young people were delivering bread by bike. But when I came into Breadwinners, what I was very much into is we was forming these mentoring opportunities, and that could be much better achieved on a market, or to be part of a community of other traders and having that access to regular customers and local people that are living in the area. And also markets allow to build that relationship, to be on a place where people are on the weekend having a good time and they're getting their fresh produce of bread, of vegetables, of cheese, of many other produce. And I thought that it would be a great place for young refugees to feel included in their new communities, to both talk to the local people but also form a network of other traders and have that support and be part of the community, and most importantly have a role in the community, which is in this case to provide artisan organic bread to the local people.
That's amazing. Wow, that's a big and massive achievement from where you started and where you are now. That's really good, and big congratulations. What kind of challenges were you seeing these young people face that Breadwinners wanted to tackle?
So everybody living in the UK, you will have seen how the media portrays young refugees or refugees in general. I think politics use it a lot to scapegoat for many other problems, and I think that's not fair on the first point. And also, by getting to know young people and young refugees and working with them, and everybody that comes into contact with Breadwinners, you will definitely see what we see every day, which is young people that are really keen to work, very interested in participating and taking an active role of that community and giving something back. And I can see that every single day I work for Breadwinners, and that's what really motivates me to do it. On top of that, young people face probably trauma from the past and from the very hard journeys. It's practically impossible to come to the UK to claim asylum in in a legal way. So the process is done in a very, very hard way, and it does push people to take terrible journeys into the UK. And once they come into the UK, they have some needs met, but not all the needs. And sometimes, housing can be a challenge. Many young people are at risk of homelessness or going to homelessness. Accessing mental health is very tough, and also integrating into the community is not easy. So, Breadwinners work with a range of other charities that do other community work, and Breadwinners is there to provide the work experience, the training and the mentoring so that they can progress. And there's many other charities that work in legal advice, in housing, in mental health that are part of our partners and I feel like it's very much a lot of organizations' effort, and many times we are picking up what the government or other, bigger organizations are not able to do.
A big theme of this show is connection. How does Breadwinners help young people find community in a new city or country?
So I think something that I'm very proud of, and I think is our best way to connect, is that we pair every single young people on our programs doing work experience at the market with a mentor. And mentors can be, in our case, any people in London or in Brighton that are keen to support other new people in the country, that they've been, in London or in Brighton for a few years, so they understand where they are. They have a network already of people, of friends, of families, and probably they've been through 1 or 2 or 3 or more jobs or had a career, in the UK, so that they can support that young person to progress through and work out what they want to do, how they can do it, who they can introduce them to. And I think what is really important is that both of them get a lot of benefit out of it. The young people will have somebody, a local person that can show them where to go, how to go about it, how to write a CV, how to prepare for an interview, and access the network of the mentor. But the mentors also learn a lot from the young people. They get inspired by the young people, by the will to succeed and the will to be part of the community. So I think it's both ways. It's a really nice connection that benefits both the mentee and the mentor.
Personally, myself, I've been part of Breadwinners program as a riser, working in the market, talking with the customers. It had really had a good impact and boosted my energy, my confidence, how to be a really good customer service, talking to people, get to express myself, and really had helped me a lot. And now I'm here interviewing you, which is really amazing. And thanks to Breadwinners helping to boost my confidence working with the mentor, which is really a part of what you're doing, offering a mentor to young people, young refugees as me, so to help tackle some of the challenges. What do you think the wider public often misunderstands about refugees or asylum seekers, and how people can get involved or support your work?
That's a great question. I think, unfortunately, probably because of politics and because of media, when you say the word refugee, probably the first thing that comes into your mind is people in a small boat crossing a piece of water. But you don't see that, what we see is like young people that are highly motivated to be part of the community, that want to support each other, people that are really have an awareness of what life is about, I think. Like how things can be super challenging and super tough, but also there's a lot of happiness and laugh, and being in the market in Breadwinners with you, for example, or with many other young people, is actually something really enjoyable and it's fun, and people are really just human beings, and we have so much in common. So I think what I would say it could be a misunderstanding is that there's big differences where we all need the same. We need a safe place to live. We need a safe environment. We need a community that support us. Everybody needs that. And I think, looking more into the commonalities, we are all, part of a family. We are all gonna miss people that we don't see or that we don't have close. So trying to find all that common things are more important than the things that separate us or that cause fear. I think a lot of misinterpretation is probably caused by fears. And I would encourage people to be brave and to get to know the people that you fear, if that's possible. One way, or if you are already keen to support young refugees, there's so many charities that support young refugees, so I would encourage you to find your local charity that is doing something with young refugees. In London and in Brighton, we are always recruiting for volunteer mentors, so that's a very good way to support someone, and anyone with the right willingness to do it can do it. So anybody that's been in London or in Brighton for a while and has a job or already had many jobs in the past can support a young refugee, and we train you to become a volunteer mentor. And you can do that by going to our website, breadwinners.org.uk, and signing up. And then we will train you and we will introduce you to a young person. And so this is also an open call for anybody that wants to support young refugees to reach out to charities like us. And if it is us, you can go to breadwinners.org.uk and sign up for volunteering with us.
Thank you so much, Martin, and have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
I think I'm going to find myself a fresh loaf at one of the Breadwinners stalls this weekend. You can find out more at breadwinners.org.uk. Welcome to a new curious and cryptic segment. With the help of some well-placed and generous individuals with access to vaults of audio recordings, we've been able to assemble a collection of never-before-heard snippets of voices long lost. For some reason or another, these recordings were deemed significant contributions worth keeping in the catalogues of human histories. But more intriguingly, they were determined to be worth obscuring from the ears of the public. While their value and the reason for their obfuscation may not be immediately evident, they are sure to tickle their way into your inner ear. This is Audio Archives. Today, we've been sent a piece of a puzzle, a single entry into what we understand to be a significant series of recordings. While we have yet to identify the source of this clip, it appears to be an out-of-context segment from a museum's audio guide. However, without access to the full series, it's impossible for us to determine the type of exhibit, the museum, or even the country in which this guide is offering insight into. It is crucial both to our source at the archives and to us here at the Big Smoke that we discern the answers hiding between the lines. This task is, of course, made more difficult by the habit of vague, verbose, and esoteric rambling that is prevalent in this type of gallery guide. Perhaps your ears may ascertain something we've missed. Enjoy clip 1 of the audio guide.
Which brings us to the penultimate room. Now you'd be forgiven for feeling a sense of intimidation, or perhaps even a strange feeling of being watched. This, of course, is the result of the obvious architectural choices that set this room apart from the rest of the stops on this tour. Before you step through the threshold, take a moment to look around. Acknowledge the height of the ceilings, the full use of the wall space, and the other patrons who shuffle in, dwarfed by the pieces around them.
We are now, of course, subject to the ramblings I had warned you of. The word big apparently wouldn't do the space justice. Do listen further to marvel at the guide's reluctance to simply use the word old.
Take a deep breath and notice the hint of mustiness, air that was breathed by civilizations hundreds of years before. Imagine the layers of significance the space has had to generations of visitors, from the first people to build this space to the decades of tourists like yourself who continue to make pilgrimage to this site. This is the only room that has been entirely preserved as it was. As always, we will begin by going tumble dice-wise, starting with face 1 on the floor.
Now, among the many mysteries of this recording is the use of this recurring phrase, tumbling dice-wise. Analysts have determined it to be an alternative to the much more common clockwise and counterclockwise descriptors we commonly use. Is this a piece of creative liberty on the part of the museum guide desperately trying to appear intellectual? Or is this perhaps a glimpse into a subtle but significant cultural difference? My contact at the archives personally believes this to be evidence that this recording could be coming from a time or a world that is ever so slightly different from our own. While this seems far-fetched, there is no record of any other culture or language using tumbling dice-wise to describe orders of rotation. Perhaps there was a greater need for three-dimensional orienteering in this culture compared to our satisfactory use of a two-dimensional clock face. Do keep this in mind as you listen. My contact at the archives is very keen for any clues that indicate place or time.
Decades of tourists like yourself who continue to make pilgrimage to this site. This is the only room that has been entirely preserved as it was. As always, we will begin by going tumble dice-wise, starting with face 1 on the floor. You by now will have noticed the massive scratches and cuts interwoven across the center of the room's floor like an etched mosaic. This pattern may look like an artistic rendering, but it is in fact a result of the initial contact we've been leading up to.
Ah, yes, this initial contact. By analyzing the speech patterns of this recording and using an AI to compare it to other audio guides from known sources, we've been able to infer that this must be some kind of recurring thesis or subject. Does it perhaps refer to the contact of warring civilizations? A peace treaty? Something else? What was this, quote, initial contact? And what does it have to do with this museum or this preserved site? My apologies for interjecting. I shouldn't mention this, but if our audiences were to gain any fresh insight from this recording, it would significantly increase the chances of us procuring more intriguing audio bites in the future. My contact at the archive is driven by curiosity, not benevolence. The only thing I can offer him is the reach of many acute ears. Now, back to the description of the floor.
The etchings around the damaged center feature the spirals typical of this region, and the damage on the stonework has been expertly integrated into the design that spreads beyond it. There is ongoing scholarly debate about the Mandela-like strokes that radiate from the scarred stones in the center and make up the rest of the floor's mosaic. Some believe it is symbolic, an act of reclaiming pain with beauty, and nothing more than aesthetic representations.
Now, this is the first of two theories you will hear as to the meaning of the designs on this floor. It makes me think of kintsugi. If that's the meaning behind this massive design, what does that say about the civilization that made it? This next section, my archives contact tells me, was until recently entirely redacted. Only this week was he able to gather the remainder of the recording.
Not everyone agrees with this theory of a visually appealing repair job. A smaller minority of linguists and historians believe that the etchings surrounding the damage are actually our only sample of missing language, one that we've only seen referenced but never seen any direct example of. Press the octagon on your device to listen to linguist Dr. V. Chisling's insight on this argument.
You're standing in what scientists and historians have dubbed the epicenter of convergence, a rare intersection that has academic significance to scientists, anthropologists, art historians, and more recently, linguists. The existence of what has been colloquially known as other tongue has been debated ever since reference to it turned up at this site's sister location. Allow me to settle this dispute. Other tongue definitely existed. That much is certain. However, it was believed to have come and gone without a trace. What makes other tongue so unique, according to the few records that referenced it, was that it was one of a very small sample of languages that existed only in its written form. The closest example to a language system like Other Tongue would be mathematical notation. The symbols used to communicate information and ideas in the mathematical language exist without an oral counterpart, yet can be read and understood. Some linguists, myself included, believe that the etchings on the floor of this site are the only known representation of Other Tongue's notation. True to records, its symbols radiate from the center, in this case the impact zone, like ripples in a pond. The notation system has always been described as circular rather than linear. Another strong case for this Mandela being an example of Other Tongue is its association with this site in particular, given its close proximity to a civilization that would have had the opportunity to embrace this language. This civilization would have had a perfect blend of timing, technology, and culture to be exposed to Other Tongue. Critics of this theory exist in two camps: those who refute the notion of Other Tongue entirely, and those who agree with its existence but do not believe these floor designs to be a sample of it. Of the second group, the strongest argument against the claim that these markings are Other Tongue refer to the sheer size of the work. The design, spreading out from the damage in the center of the floor, fills the entirety of this large room. The most detailed accounts of Other Tongue describe it as an incredibly efficient notation system, capable of conveying massive amounts of information within spaces the size of a human palm. The amount of information contained in a piece of text this size would exceed the entirety of recorded human history. No reader would ever be able to digest this amount of information in a lifetime. Rebutting this, the only counterpoint worth mentioning is the embellishment theory. The supposition is that this is, rather than a record of information or communication, actually a piece of poetic artistry. These scholars believe that this extensive use of space does not contain an inordinate amount of information, but is rather the verbose inscription of a single, possibly simple idea. The combination of its ornateness, the size of it, and the way it aesthetically arcs around the columns and other works in the space indicate a desire for design and an appreciation for beauty over practicality. Other Tongue is certainly an efficient language, but this may be an example of the scribe taking a so-called scenic route. The passage is unknown, but the repetition of certain markings and patterns of design definitely offer this theory a certain degree of merit amongst linguists and art historians. It would seem that a few core themes and ideas repeat themselves throughout the writing. You may be standing upon actual poetry, a lost epic, an ambitious allegory, or a lamenting ode. What a shame that the language was lost before the meaning of this poem could be extrapolated. Perhaps this piece doesn't need to be translated before it can be interpreted. What do you think the artist may have been trying to achieve? Or is the embellishment theory simply an act of humanist projection? Perhaps we are imposing our own limitations upon all minds. If we couldn't fathom reading this much information, it must be nothing more than verbose art?
Welcome back to the penultimate room. Continuing tumble dice-wise, we move our attention from face 1 on the ground to face 5, the wall behind you alongside the entrance you've just come from. Take a look at the...
And there you have it. Nothing more than an impossible-to-interpret snippet of something long lost. Perhaps some of you may have insight into whatever it is that was being described here. Our researchers have been unable to identify or trace this language they call Other Tongue, nor have we found any reference to what they call the epicenter of convergence. Are these, like the museum, lost from the records? Or are they from a world apart from us? Only time, and perhaps a few more recordings, will tell. Where is this museum? What year is it from? Where in the world does this mysterious room appear? Where did Other Tongue come from? And where did it go? Please do send us your suspicions so that we might unlock more clips for future segments of Audio Archives. Oh, you know what that means? It's now time for Archie's Neuro Nuggets. Quick, actionable insights inspired by the emerging field of neuroaesthetics.
Hello, Big Smoke listeners. My name is Archie McAlpine. I am an interdisciplinary specialist in the wellbeing space. I studied biomedical science and then a master's in neuroaesthetics, the newest branch of neuroscience, which explores how our brains respond to the arts and to our environments. This week, we're going to look at art and emotional regulation. So actively engaging in art, doing things like drawing, colouring, doodling, and painting is actually a powerhouse tool when it comes to processing emotions and combating trauma. It helps us process emotions through 3 strategies: avoidance, which is numbing emotions; approach, which is facing emotions head-on; and self-development, which is learning and moving forward. So here's some science behind it. Engaging in art significantly reduces our stress hormone cortisol within 45 minutes. And engaging in drawing causes a release of a cocktail of feel-good neurochemicals in the brain, including serotonin, which is our happy hormone, dopamine, which is our reward hormone, and endorphins, which is the body's natural painkiller. So for those of you that want to try this at home, try doodling or colouring a few minutes a day. It could be whilst you're on the move or chilling out to your favourite podcast. Reflect. Does it help you process feelings? Do you notice your body start to calm down, or do any particular emotions come up during the practice? Unlike pharmaceuticals, which target 1 or 2 specific biological mechanisms, the arts engage thousands simultaneously. The arts engage us in creative states of flow, firmly help us establish our sense of identity, and also allow us to tap into play, which we often really neglect as adults.
Thanks for that, Archie. You can find out more about Archie and his work in the show notes. It's time to reveal the maple leaf. Was it bartering with maple syrup, the bakery bandit, or 3 a.m. snow shoveling? The real Canadian headline was... From City News. Vancouver bakery bandit calls to apologize, offers to pay for broken door and cupcakes. When it comes to bizarre break-ins in Vancouver, this caper may just take the cake. A young man broke through the glass door of a bakery and tried to sweep up the glass with a mop before leaving with 6 cupcakes. It turns out Vancouver's bakery bandit is actually pretty sweet. Days after Sweet Something was broken into by someone who proceeded to steal 6 cupcakes, the business owner says the man responsible has called to personally say sorry. The big news is that our burglar gave us a call to the bakery, owner Emma Irvine said in an update on TikTok. I couldn't believe that he had called the bakery. I don't know why. I just never thought someone would call in after that. To have a conversation with him, it kind of closes the book on it for me. She says the man has offered to cover the cost of the door that was broken. He also offered to pay for the cupcakes he took. I actually asked him what he thought about the cupcakes, and he said that he really enjoyed them. Although, who knows if he felt like he had to tell me that, Irvine said with a laugh. If you'd like to read the full article, you'll find a link in the show notes. Well, that's our show. Thanks for joining us here at The Big Smoke. I hope something today sparked your curiosity, cracked a smile, or at the very least made you start dreaming up your next adventure. If you liked what you heard, share this episode with a friend. It's how we keep the doors open to this speakeasy of stories and strange delights. Until next time, friends, we'll see you in The Big Smoke.